In the busy streets of Lagos lived a young woman named Amma, kind, humble, and always helping everyone, even those who didn't deserve it. After her father passed away, she was left to live with her stepmother and two stepbrothers. They smiled to her face but hated her kindness, her beauty, and the love everyone had for her. Amma didn't know they had made a dark plan, to trap her in a fire and collect the insurance money meant for her late father's house. One night they locked her room, poured kerosene, and set the place on fire. Amma screamed for help, pounding on the door as flames crawled up the walls. No one came. Smoke filled her lungs and she fainted. The neighbors only saw the house burning. Her stepfamily cried fake tears, telling everyone Amma was dead. The city mourned the poor girl who had always been so kind. But fate had other plans. A nearby fisherman found her body barely breathing by the riverbank. He took her to a remote clinic where she spent months fighting for her life. Her face was scarred, her body weak, but her heart stronger than ever. She decided she would not live in fear anymore. She changed her name slightly and started working quietly with the police, training as a private investigator. Months later, her stepfamily filed a huge insurance claim. They had no idea the officer investigating the fraud was Amma herself. When she walked into their house, they froze. Her stepmother's hands shook. Her stepbrothers went pale. Amma removed her scarf, revealing the scars on her face. The room fell silent. "I died in your story," she said calmly, looking straight at them. "But God wrote another ending." The police arrested them for fraud and attempted murder. As the sirens wailed, Amma stood outside the same house they once burned. The flames hadn't killed her. They had purified her. She smiled through her tears and whispered, "You tried to burn me, but God used the ashes to crown me." Toriro had grown up with nothing but her siblings. Their parents had died when she was small, and she believed her older brother and sister were all she had left in the world. She cooked for them, cleaned for them, and even gave up school so they could continue theirs. She thought they loved her. But love was the one thing they never truly gave her. One cold night everything changed. Toriro came home from the market to find the house strangely quiet. Before she could step inside, her brother smiled and said softly, "Stay in your room tonight. We'll handle everything." She didn't think much of it, until she smelled smoke. When she tried to open her door, it wouldn't budge. It was locked from the outside. Panic filled her chest as she screamed and banged on the wood. Flames began crawling under the door, smoke filling her lungs. Outside, her siblings stood crying for the neighbors to see. They shouted that the fire had taken their sweet sister. They collected sympathy, money, and donations, pretending to mourn while she fought for her life inside. Just as Toriro's strength was fading, the door burst open. A firefighter, a stranger, carried her out in his arms, coughing and barely conscious. His name was Chief Moyo, and he refused to leave her side. He helped her heal, helped her find purpose, and became the father figure she never had. Years passed. Toriro went to school, studied hard, and joined the police force. She worked her way up until she became the chief inspector, fearless, respected, and known for uncovering fraud. She hid her scars beneath a light mask, but she never forgot the night of flames. One morning, she was assigned a major case, a fraud investigation involving a family that had faked a tragedy years ago to collect donations. When she saw the names on the file, her heart stopped. It was her siblings. They were still lying, still living off the sympathy they'd earned from her death. When Toriro walked into the interrogation room, her brother and sister looked up, annoyed, then froze. Her voice was calm, steady. "Remember me?" she asked. Slowly, she took off her mask, revealing the faint burn marks that time could never erase. Gasps filled the room. Her sister's eyes widened in horror. Her brother's lips trembled. "You left me to die," Toriro said quietly. "But I lived. And now justice is alive too." That night, as her siblings were led away in handcuffs, Toriro stepped outside and looked up at the stars. The same sky that watched her burn now watched her rise. She whispered, "The night of flames didn't end me, it remade me." Zanil had always dreamed of becoming an architect. She loved drawing houses, imagining beautiful homes filled with love and peace. But her own home was nothing like that. Her mother and uncle constantly fought over the land her late father left behind. Zanil was the only thing standing between them and full ownership, because her father's will said she had to sign before they could sell it. She was young, but she wasn't foolish. She refused to sign, knowing it was her father's last gift to her. That defiance sealed her fate. One night, her mother called her sweetly to sleep early. Zanil felt uneasy but obeyed. In the middle of the night, she woke up to the crackling sound of fire and the sharp smell of smoke. The room was hot, her curtains blazing, the walls glowing orange. She tried to run to the door, but it was locked. "Mama!" she screamed, coughing and crying. No answer came. Through the window, she saw two shadows walking away, her mother and uncle. The betrayal crushed her harder than the smoke choking her lungs. Desperate, Zanil broke the window with a chair and jumped. She hit the ground hard, her leg bleeding, but she crawled through the tall grass until she reached the woods. There she collapsed, half alive, half broken. By morning, she was found by a nun from a nearby convent who was on her morning walk. Sister Miriam took her in, cared for her burns and helped her heal. Under her gentle guidance, Zanil went back to school and later studied architecture, the very thing that once gave her hope. Every design she drew was a promise to herself. She would rebuild what others destroyed. 5 years later, her name filled newspapers. Young architect wins contract to rebuild historic estate. The estate was the same land her family had burned for greed. When she arrived at the site in her sleek white suit, cameras flashing, reporters asking questions, she smiled calmly. That same evening, her mother and uncle sat frozen in front of the TV. Their faces drained of color when they saw her alive, successful, radiant. At the press conference, a journalist asked her, "What inspired this project?" Zanil looked straight into the camera and said softly, "I built what they tried to destroy." Her voice trembled slightly, but her eyes shone with peace. The house that once held her pain was now rising again, not from fire but from faith. The world clapped for her, but Zanil's smile was for her father's memory and for the girl who refused to die in the smoke. Lorato grew up believing her father was her protector, her hero, the man who would do anything to keep her safe. But she was wrong. After her mother remarried, everything in their home changed. Her stepmother whispered lies, poisoned hearts, and soon Lorato's father began seeing his daughter as a burden instead of a blessing. She didn't understand why he had turned so cold, until the night she overheard everything. Late one evening, Lorato couldn't sleep. As she walked quietly to the kitchen for water, she heard her father and stepmother talking in low voices. "We'll burn the house tomorrow night," her stepmother whispered. "If she's inside, it'll look like an accident. The insurance will cover everything." Her father hesitated for a moment, then said, "It's the only way." The glass slipped from Lorato's hand and shattered on the floor. She froze, terrified. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought they would hear it. She ran back to her room, pretending to be asleep when her father came to check on her. That night, she didn't close her eyes once. She waited until everyone was asleep, then opened her window and climbed out barefoot into the dark. She didn't look back. The next morning, the house went up in flames. Everyone believed she was dead, just as they planned. Lorato stayed hidden for years, doing odd jobs, sleeping in shelters, and surviving on sheer willpower. But she never forgot. She promised herself that one day she would come back, not for revenge but for redemption. 10 years passed. Lorato built herself from the ground up. She studied, worked, saved, and built a small charity that helped abused women find safety and hope. Her strength and compassion caught the attention of donors, and soon she was able to buy properties for her foundation. When the paperwork for one particular building came through, she froze. It was her old home. The same one that was once her prison had been foreclosed, abandoned, forgotten. She didn't hesitate. She bought it. Months later, the house had been completely rebuilt, bright walls, open windows, and rooms filled with laughter and healing. It was now a women's shelter, a place of hope born from pain. One rainy afternoon, a weak knock came at the door. Lorato opened it, and saw her father and stepmother, both older, broken, and hungry. They didn't recognize her at first. "Please," her father said quietly, "we have nowhere to go." Lorato looked at them for a long time. The silence was heavy, filled with everything that had ever been left unsaid. Then she smiled gently and said, "God bless the homeless." She closed the door softly. Tears rolled down her cheeks, not of pain but peace. They had tried to erase her, but she came back stronger, brighter, and unshakable. The fire didn't end her story. It began it. Nia was the kind of girl everyone in her village loved, warm, hardworking, and full of dreams. After her parents passed away, she inherited a small estate and a set of legal papers that proved her right to the family land. But that inheritance also made her a target. Her cousins, who had always looked down on her, became jealous. They wanted everything she had, the land, the money, and the name that came with it. One evening, her cousins came to visit, pretending to care. They brought food, laughter, and fake smiles. Nia felt grateful, thinking maybe the family bond was healing. But when she went to bed, they quietly sneaked into her room, took the inheritance papers from her drawer, and locked her inside. Then they poured kerosene around the house and set it ablaze. Nia woke up coughing, the room filled with thick smoke. She screamed, pounded the door, begged for help, but only heard footsteps fading away. Her heart broke not just from fear but from betrayal. She tried to climb out the window, but the flames were too close. Just when she thought it was over, the window shattered. A stranger's hand reached through the fire. It was a poor farmer named Bayo who lived nearby. He had seen the smoke and ran barefoot across the fields to help. He pulled her out, burning his arm in the process. He took her to his small hut, nursed her wounds, and gave her food when she couldn't work. For months she stayed there, healing quietly. Nia promised herself that if she ever rose again, she would never forget the man who saved her, or the ones who tried to destroy her. Years passed. Nia worked harder than anyone, starting small by growing vegetables on a rented piece of land. She learned about farming, business, and management. Her determination turned into success. Slowly, she built her own company, a powerful agro firm that became one of the biggest suppliers in the region. Her company grew so large that many small farmers and distributors depended on her contracts, including the company run by her own cousins. They had no idea who owned it. One bright afternoon, Nia visited the factory where they worked. She walked in wearing a crisp white suit, confident and calm. The workers stopped and stared. Her cousins looked up from their desks and froze. They recognized her face instantly, even with the faint scars that time had softened. Nia smiled softly. "It's been a long time," she said. They stammered, trying to speak, but she raised her hand. "You burned my home," she said quietly, her voice strong and steady. "Now I burn your pride." With that, she signed the termination papers right in front of them. Security escorted them out as the entire staff watched. Her cousins left with their heads down, humiliated and speechless. Later that evening, Nia drove back to the countryside. She found Bayo, the farmer who had saved her, still tending his land. She gave him new farming equipment, hired his family under her company, and built him a proper home. As the sun set behind them, Nia looked toward the horizon and whispered, "The fire they started didn't destroy me, it built me." And for the first time she felt truly free. In the heart of Accra lived a gentle young woman named Esi. She was honest, hardworking, and full of dreams. But her own family saw her kindness as weakness. Her parents had always favored her younger sister, Abina, who was spoiled and manipulative. One day, when some family money went missing, Abina blamed Esi, and everyone believed her. No one listened to Esi's tears or her pleas for truth. Her father called her a thief, her mother looked at her with disgust, and her uncle whispered that she had brought shame to the family. That night, as she packed her small bag to leave, she overheard their whispers outside the hut. Her uncle said coldly, "When the hut burns, so will the shame." Sai froze, her hands shaking. Before she could escape, the smell of kerosene filled the air. Within seconds, flames surrounded her. The fire roared, eating up the walls, the floor, her breath. She screamed for help, but no one came. By morning, her family told the neighbors a tragic story, that Esi had set the house on fire in guilt and died inside. They cried fake tears, burying an empty coffin. But fate wasn't done with Esi. A group of travelers driving through the outskirts that night had seen the fire and pulled her out, barely alive. Her body was scarred, but her spirit refused to die. They took her to a hospital, and later one of them, a kind woman from London, offered to help her start anew abroad. She said yes, leaving behind the ashes and betrayal that nearly killed her. Years passed. ESI worked hard, studying, saving, and building a company that imported Ghanaian crafts and products worldwide. Her intelligence and determination turned her into a millionaire before she was even 35. But wealth wasn't her goal, peace was. Then one day, she received a call about a piece of land available for expansion, the same land where her family once lived, the same land they had burned her for. She felt her heart stop for a moment, then said calmly, "I'll buy it." Weeks later, ESI arrived in Accra wearing an elegant dress and a silk scarf covering her neck and cheeks. Her family, now struggling and desperate, attended the signing, not realizing who she was. They only saw a rich foreign donor, someone who could save them from losing everything. As they laughed nervously and thanked her, Isai sat quietly, watching them. When it was time to sign, she looked up and asked softly, "Do you remember a girl named ESI?" Her father's pen froze midair. Her mother's eyes widened. Slowly ESI removed her scarf. The burned scars shimmered faintly in the sunlight. The room went silent. No one breathed. Her voice didn't shake. "You burned me for greed," she said. "But fire can't kill destiny." After the papers were signed, she stood, smiled faintly, and walked away. Outside, the wind felt warm, not cruel. The same flames that were meant to destroy her had made her unstoppable. She was no longer the girl from the ashes. She was the woman from the flames. Bull grew up in a small town where life was simple, but love was complicated. Her father, once a kind man, had fallen deep into debt. Every day he came home angry, drunk, and bitter. Her mother had passed away years earlier, and Bull was the only one left to remind him of the woman he lost. Instead of love, she received blame. Still, Bull worked hard, selling handmade soaps at the market to survive. One night, her father sat outside with a cigarette, whispering with a man in a dark suit. Bull didn't know it then, but they were talking about her, about a life insurance policy he had secretly taken in her name. His plan was cruel: burn the house down while she slept and collect the money. That night, she went to bed tired but hopeful. Around midnight, she woke up coughing, the air thick with smoke. She ran to the door, but the handle was burning hot. Flames licked the walls, and she could hear her father outside pretending to cry for help. Realizing the truth, she smashed the window with a chair and climbed out, cutting her hands on the glass. She ran barefoot into the dark fields, her heart breaking with every step. No one ever came looking for her. The next morning, her father told everyone she had died in the fire. The village mourned, and he collected the insurance money. Bull hid in another town, taking small jobs and sleeping in church basements. But she refused to give up. She used her old soap recipe and started making small batches again, selling them on the street corner. People loved her soaps. They smelled like hope, like something pure that came out of pain. Years passed. Her soap business grew little by little. She gave it a name, Phoenix Organics, because like the bird, she had risen from the fire that tried to end her. Investors noticed her talent, and soon her products were sold across the country. Her brand became a household name, and her face appeared on magazine covers. Then came the National Business Award show. Bull stood on stage in a flowing golden gown, smiling as she accepted the Entrepreneur of the Year award. Cameras flashed, the crowd cheered, and far away, her father sat in his small living room, watching the TV in disbelief. The woman on the screen looked older, stronger, glowing with success, but he recognized those eyes. As the host asked what message she had for others, Bull looked into the camera and said softly, "To the people who left me in flames, I rose from them." The audience erupted in applause. Her father dropped the remote, tears filling his eyes, but it was too late. Bull had found her light in the very fire he used to destroy her. She didn't just survive, she turned her pain into power. Chica was a quiet, sweet girl who believed that kindness could heal anything. After her mother died, her father remarried a woman named Madame Grace, elegant on the outside but cruel on the inside. From the very first day, Grace treated Chica like an unwanted guest. She gave her chores, insults, and silence for love. Chica tried to please her, but nothing was ever enough. One night, the power went out during dinner. Grace lit a candle and smiled sweetly at Chica. "Go to your room," she said softly. Chica obeyed, thinking the kindness was real this time. But as soon as she entered her room, she heard the click of the lock behind her. The next sound was the sharp crackle of fire. Her stepmother had accidentally knocked over the candle, or so she would later claim. Smoke filled the room. Chica screamed, pounding on the door, coughing as flames crawled up the curtains. Her father was out of town. No one came. She broke the window with her bare hands and jumped out, her arms and face burned, her body covered in scars. The neighbors found her lying in the mud, barely breathing. Grace told everyone it was an accident and even cried at the hospital, fake tears for her poor stepdaughter. But Chica survived. She spent months recovering, wrapped in bandages, her reflection almost unrecognizable. For a long time, she couldn't look in the mirror without crying. But as her pain faded, something stronger grew inside her: purpose. She decided that no one would ever silence her again. She studied hard, worked her way through school, and became a lawyer. Her passion was justice, the kind she never received. Years later, she was assigned a major case. A fraud investigation involving a charity organization accused of stealing donation money meant for burn victims. The founder's name made her freeze: Madam Grace. When Chica walked into the courtroom, she wore a black veil over her face. Grace didn't recognize her, too busy pretending to be a respectable woman. Chica spoke confidently, presenting the evidence, exposing every lie. The judge listened closely as she laid out the proof: Grace's fake records, the stolen funds, the manipulation. Then, just before the final verdict, Chica said quietly, "Your Honor, I want to make one final statement." She reached up, removed her veil, and faced her stepmother. Gasps filled the room. Grace's face turned pale, her lips trembling. The same scars she tried to erase were now symbols of power and survival. Chica looked her straight in the eye and said, "You tried to destroy me with fire. But justice doesn't burn." The courtroom was silent. Grace couldn't even speak as the judge declared her guilty of fraud. Chica walked out of the courthouse into the sunlight, her head held high. The burns on her skin told a story, not of pain but of victory. She had turned her scars into strength, and her silence into justice. The night was quiet in Mombasa when Imani's world went up in flames. Her greedy brothers had always wanted their father's house, the one thing she loved most. They told the neighbors it was an accident, but deep down Imani knew it wasn't. She remembered the sound of the lock clicking from the outside, the smell of kerosene, and her brother's muffled laughter before everything went dark. But fate wasn't done with her. A passerby, a fisherman on his way home, saw the smoke, broke through the window, and pulled her out just before the roof collapsed. Her body was burned, her heart broken, but she was alive. The man took her to a distant village where no one knew her name. There, with time and kindness, she healed, not just her skin but her spirit. Years passed. Imani learned to write again, to speak again, to live again. She became a journalist, bold, brave, and relentless. Her stories spoke for the voiceless, her pen exposing corruption and greed. And then one day, destiny handed her the biggest story of her career, an interview with a grieving family whose sister had died in a tragic house fire. It was them, her brothers. Imani arrived at their mansion with a camera crew, her hair short, her voice calm, her face still bearing faint scars. They didn't recognize her, not yet. They spoke in front of the cameras about how much they missed their sister, how they tried to save her. The audience watching live could see their tears, their fake pain. Then Imani smiled softly. "Do you really miss her?" she asked. "Every day," one brother said, his hand over his heart. She leaned forward, her eyes locking with his. "Good," she said, "because she's standing right in front of you." The room froze. Her brothers' faces drained of color. One of them stammered, "Imani, it can't be you." The camera caught every second, their shock, their guilt, their trembling hands. Imani removed her scarf, revealing the burn scars along her neck. "You wanted me gone," she said quietly. "But the fire didn't take me, it made me stronger." The anchor's mic trembled. The live broadcast exploded across the country. Viewers flooded social media, outraged and amazed. Her brother's lies collapsed in real time, their inheritance stolen by greed now turned to ash. Imani walked out of that house not as a victim, but as a voice of truth. The world finally saw the real story, not of a woman who died in fire, but of one who rose from it. Kendi was always the quiet one in her family, soft-spoken, gentle, and never the type to fight back. Maybe that's why her mother and stepbrother thought she'd be easy to get rid of. One night, they locked her inside her room, poured kerosene around the house, and set it on fire. All for her late father's inheritance. But fate had other plans. As the flames grew higher, the sky opened up. Heavy rain poured down, fighting the fire while two travelers passing by saw the smoke and rushed in. They broke the door and pulled Kendi out, coughing, trembling, half-conscious, but alive. She left that town and never looked back. Years went by. She worked hard, studied, and started a small property business. One plot, then 2, then 20. Her name became known everywhere. Kendi Estates. People who once ignored her now respected her. Then one day, a new deal came across her desk, land for sale in her old town. The address made her heart skip. It was the same land where her mother's house once stood. She went back, dressed in power and peace. Her mother and stepbrother didn't recognize her at first, not the burned, broken girl they left behind. But when she spoke, their faces turned pale. They begged her not to buy the land. "Please, this is our home," her stepbrother said, tears in his voice. Kendi looked at the house that once tried to swallow her in flames and smiled softly. "You lit the fire," she said. "I became the storm." Then she signed the papers, calm, steady, unstoppable, while thunder rolled in the distance.